The night sky above Cadaverous Secundus did not bleed in silence. It screamed. An unnatural tear split the heavens, jagged as a sword wound through blackened flesh. The people of the hive world fell to their knees as the void churned with light not meant for mortal eyes, sickly greens, hellfire reds, and the iridescent shimmer of madness. The ecclesiarchy bells tolled, summoning the faithful into cathedrals already crumbling with age. Arbites sealed the streets, bolters at the ready, their prayers trembling on bloodless lips, but no creed nor catechism could banish what came. From the wound in reality spilled a roar, deep as thunder yet sharp as the war cry of a dying god. The tear widened, sparks of warp flame igniting the night like falling meteors. The earth shook, ancient statues of the god emperor toppling in cascades of ash. In the Vox networks, desperate officers screamed heresy. The Inquisition marked the sky with forbidden sigils. Even the Astartes garrisoned on distant moons felt the tremor ripple across their gene-forged marrow. Something had entered the Imperium. At first it was only shadow shifting, writhing, as if the warp itself birthed a nightmare. Then from the crack in the firmament, a body descended, not like a man falling, but like a weapon hurled by the hand of a forgotten titan. It struck the wasteland beyond the hive with force enough to rend steel spires into dust. The shockwave roared outward, pulverizing the ground for leagues, hurling guardsmen into walls like dolls. The dust rose, choking the night in a storm of ash. When the storm subsided, they saw him, pale flesh scarred as if carved by centuries of war, a face like granite, beard dusted with gray, eyes burning with a fire older than this galaxy. Across his forearms chains clung like serpents, fused to his very flesh, their broken ends trailing with echoes of battle long since lost. And in his hand, impossible yet real, a weapon of foreign make, a curved axe, single-edged, heavy enough to fell beasts beyond reason. The soldiers who survived whispered prayers, but not to the emperor. This was not the visage of a saint, this was the form of a god-killer. Kratos, Ghost of Sparta, lay half-buried in the crater his arrival had made. He stirred, breath hissing through his teeth. Memories swarmed him, Olympus aflame, his father's voice broken by his blade, his son's hand slipping from his grasp across dimensions. But the visions bled away, drowned by a new sensation, the oppressive weight of a universe unwelcoming, vast and cruel, a cage forged of faith and fire. He rose, the earth cracking beneath his steps. The first to approach were soldiers of the Astra Militarum. They carried lasguns trembling in their grip, their armor scuffed by years of forgotten campaigns. One, braver than the rest, barked a command. By decree of the god emperor, identify yourself, kneel, stranger, or be purged. Kratos looked upon them, eyes cold as the stones of Delphi. He did not understand their tongue fully, but he understood chains, and he understood threats. He did not kneel. Fear twisted into duty. The guardsman fired. Bolts of crimson light scorched the night air, striking his flesh. He staggered but did not fall. Pain was nothing new. Rage was the marrow of his being. He clenched his fists, and the ground groaned as if mourning what was to come. In moments the soldiers lay broken, their screams swallowed by the night. Kratos did not relish the slaughter, yet neither did he hesitate. To him they were phantoms, another pantheon of fools demanding obeisance. He had knelt once before to gods and paid in blood, never again, yet unseen eyes watched. From the shadows of the crater, the Inquisition's servants marked his every move. A rosette glimmered at a stern man's chest, his aquila-etched armor shining faint beneath the firelight. Inquisitor Die Ran of the Ordo Malleus spoke into a vox bead, voice measured though unease trembled beneath. He is not of the warp-born breeds we know. His aura defies classification. Not Daemon, not Xenos. Something older, dispatch containment. If this creature resists, cleanse the hive entire. Above, the tear in the sky began to close, its edges knitting like a wound unwilling to heal. But in its final shudder, the voices of the warp bled through, howling, laughing, calling his name though they had never known it. Kratos, Kratos, Kratos. The Ghost of Sparta raised his axe, turning toward the hive city lights in the distance. His chest heaved, not from exhaustion, but from fury without direction. He felt the eyes of unseen gods upon him. He felt the weight of a realm that demanded submission and worship, and he remembered Olympus. He remembered how gods could be slain. The Imperium did not yet know what had entered its dominion, but the warp knew, and it whispered, with a hunger eternal, "This one is ours." And so the chapter closes, not with silence but with a question echoing in the ashes of the battlefield. Would Kratos, god-killer and exile, resist the seduction of chaos, or would he become the very monster the Imperium feared? Chains bound him once more, forged from adamantine, inscribed with wards that glowed in the half-dark. They coiled around Kratos's limbs and chest like serpents of iron. Even his own immense strength could not snap them. These were no mere shackles of men, but bindings sanctified in the blood of martyrs, blessed by priests who dared not look upon his face. Every link was etched with the imperial aquila, a brand of subjugation that pressed into his flesh as he was dragged through the cold metallic corridors of the ship. The vessel was a cathedral adrift in the void, a miles-long void barge, fashioned with towers of stained adamantium and hulls crusted in gilded reliquaries. Incense burned from swinging censers, filling the air with choking smoke, a desperate attempt to cleanse what their hearts whispered was unclean. Kratos's eyes scanned it all, the chanting priests, the hissing servitors with faces sewn shut, the murals depicting battles waged in the name of a golden figure upon a throne. The smell of oil, blood and sacred ash clawed at his senses. He had fought under temples of Olympus once, but this was devotion turned into tyranny. The Inquisitor walked at the head of the procession, Daron of the Ordo Malleus, his face carved with ritual scars, his armor marked with purity seals that fluttered as he strode. He did not look back at his prisoner, though his hand never left the pommel of his power blade. Around them stormtroopers kept their rifles leveled, each one trembling though they tried to mask it. They had seen what Kratos had done to a squad of guardsmen with nothing but his fists. Through vaulted passageways and colonnades filled with chanting acolytes, Kratos was paraded like a beast. At last they entered the sanctum at the ship's heart. It was a cathedral turned into a prison. Candles burned by the thousands, casting light upon mosaics of the Emperor's victories. At the far end rose an altar of black marble, before which a choir sang hymns in Gothic tongues. The sound was not beautiful, it was suffocating, crushing as if each word added weight to the chains pressing against him. Kratos was forced to his knees, his forehead nearly touched the cold iron floor, but he did not bow willingly. 2 stormtroopers shoved his shoulders until his muscles quivered against restraint. Inquisitor Daron finally turned to face him. "Creature," Daron said, his voice like stone cracked by age, "you fell from a wound in the stars. You bear strength not of this world, nor any Xenos catalogue known to the Ordo. Speak, who claims your soul? To whom do you bend knee?" Kratos's head rose slowly, eyes like coals smoldering in ash. His voice, when it came, was rough as a forge. "No one." The choir faltered for a moment, as though the word itself was heresy. Daron's gaze narrowed. "You defy even the question," the Inquisitor said. "Even the lowest beast belongs to something, its bloodline, its master, its god. You speak lies, you must be tested." Kratos's mind drifted. Gods, masters, chains, always the same, whether Olympus, Asgard, or now this empire of steel and incense. Every world seemed to weave its order on the backs of worship and obedience. He had torn gods from their thrones once, and yet here was another throne, this time unseen, a corpse said to be divine, ruling through zealotry and silence. A priest stepped forward, holding a censer that spewed bitter smoke. He pressed a relic against Kratos's forehead, a shard of bone said to have come from a saint long dead. Words of litanies were spoken, demanding the stranger's submission, demanding that his name be written into their order. The relic seared against Kratos's skin, but he did not cry out. Instead he met the priest's eyes, and in that gaze the priest faltered. There was no faith there, no supplication, only defiance. The Inquisitor's lips curled into the faintest smile. "So, you will not bow to saints or relics, perhaps you will to fire." At his command the stormtroopers lifted their rifles. Bolter barrels hummed with power, targeting the chained warrior. But before the order could be given, the ship itself trembled. Vox alarms howled. The hymns turned into shrieks. Somewhere in the void a warning was broadcast, words half swallowed by static. "Warp turbulence, cultist incursion, brace." The candles flickered, shadows writhed along the walls, and for the briefest instant Kratos thought he heard voices again, the same whispers from the tier in the sky, the same dark chorus calling his name. The Inquisitor barked orders commanding his soldiers to seal the sanctum, yet even as steel doors closed and prayers were shouted, Kratos felt it, a pressure beyond mortal reckoning. The warp pressed against this ship like the sea against a cracking hull. His chains rattled, his muscles coiled, his spirit burned. The Imperium thought him a prisoner, but the gods of the warp thought otherwise. And as the ship groaned like a dying beast, one question settled upon every soul within those cathedral walls. Had they dragged aboard salvation or damnation? The hive world of Cadaverous Secundus roared with fevered anticipation. At the base of its central spire, an edifice of stone and steel choked with gargoyles and broken saints, lay the arena, a colossal pit, carved into the bones of the hive itself, where condemned heretics, Xenos captives, and nameless criminals were thrown to slaughter for the glory of the ecclesiarchy. The air reeked of sweat, rusted blood, and incense poured from vast braziers overhead. On this night, a new spectacle had been promised. Rumors had raced like wildfire through the streets. A god had fallen, a creature from the stars captured by the Inquisition. Now he was to be tested in fire and blood. Kratos stood in the holding cells beneath the arena, chains still wound about his wrists though their locks had been broken. Guards watched from behind reinforced screens, whispering prayers as though his presence alone might crack their sanity. His axe, taken from him since his arrival, had been returned, if only to ensure the spectacle. The blade gleamed under torchlight, foreign to this galaxy, alien yet unmistakably a weapon meant for war. Above, the crowds gathered in their tens of thousands. From balconies high above, robed priests led the chants, "In his name, in his name." The audience roared it back, stamping their feet upon stone until the whole arena seemed to quake. The gates groaned open. Kratos walked into the pit, his head turned slightly as he beheld the Colosseum walls, adorned with flayed banners of heretics, their skins painted with the aquila. His breath steamed in the night air, every exhale heavy as iron. He remembered another arena, long ago in another life, when he had slaughtered beasts to amuse the gods of Olympus. How many lifetimes had he spent bound by chains, forced to spill blood for others? This was no different. The first opponent was dragged forth, a Xenos beast, twisted and malformed, perhaps once a tyrannid creature now warped by chem serums and the cruel alchemy of the Mechanicus. It hissed, its carapace glistening with ichor, multiple arms ending in bladed talons. Chains snapped and it lunged, a scream tearing the air. Kratos met it head-on. His axe struck with the weight of a thunderclap, shearing through chitin as if it were paper. The beast shrieked, talons slashing across his shoulder, drawing blood that steamed as it hit the sand. Kratos grunted but pressed forward, carving again and again until the creature collapsed in ruin, its limbs scattered across the pit. The crowd roared, priests lifted their hands in prayer, and somewhere in the warp, a deeper voice laughed. More gates opened, 2, then 3 more beasts surged into the arena, grotesque abominations stitched together from flesh and machine, hybrids of servitor and daemon. Their mouths chanted gibberish prayers to gods unnamed. They rushed Kratos as one. He answered them with fury, his chains whipped outward, catching one across its throat and dragging it into his axe's arc. Another fell beneath a brutal kick that shattered its ribcage like glass. The third leapt onto his back, claws digging into his flesh. Kratos seized its arm and tore it away with a howl, blood spraying the sand. He drove his axe upward, cleaving through skull and spine alike until silence fell again. The people screamed in ecstasy. To them this was proof of the Emperor's power. To Kratos it was only another slaughter. His breaths came harsh and deep, but his eyes burned with something more dangerous than fatigue, memory. He remembered Sparta, where men had been bred for war and made to kill for kings and gods. He remembered Olympus, where every battle had been a spectacle for the amusement of deities who watched from above. Always someone demanded his rage, always someone called it glory. Now this Imperium called it faith. The Inquisitor watched from the shadows of the upper balcony. Daeron's expression was unreadable, his fingers steepled as the stranger painted the arena with gore. Around him priests whispered of miracles, of signs, of omens. Daeron did not answer them. He merely watched, his gaze heavy with calculation. Then came the final test. The central gate rumbled open, shaking the arena walls. From within emerged a creature twice the height of a man, clad in the crude armor of chaos worshippers, a champion of the dark gods, taken in secret raids and brought forth as a blasphemy to be purged. Its horns curled like a daemon's crown, its axe dripping warp light. Its voice boomed, echoing across the arena. "Blood for the blood god." The crowd gasped, recoiling in terror. To name the blood god was heresy. But here, in the pit, no one looked away. Kratos' eyes narrowed. He recognized the madness in this warrior, the same madness he had seen in Ares' gaze, in Zeus's tyranny, in every god who demanded worship through slaughter. Yet something darker pressed against him now. He felt it stir at the edges of his mind, whispering with the same laughter that had bled from the warp itself. The Chaos Champion charged. Their axes met in an explosion of sparks. The shockwave drove sand into the sky, rattling the bones of the dead buried beneath the pit. Blow after blow shook the arena, each strike fueled by inhuman power. The crowd had fallen silent, their prayers drowned by the sound of gods testing their champion. Kratos roared, shoving his foe back, chains rattling like thunder. The Chaos Warrior answered with a howl to Khorne, swinging wide, nearly severing Kratos' arm. Blood streamed, but Kratos pressed in, eyes blazing. Memories of Olympus burned in his skull, his brother's screams, his father's lies, his son's fading voice. Rage consumed him, and with a final bellow, he split the Chaos Champion from shoulder to hip. The pit fell silent. Kratos stood over the corpse, blood dripping from his axe, chest heaving like a forge. The crowd erupted, priests weeping with ecstasy, but Kratos did not hear them, for in the silence of his victory, he heard whispers again, laughter deep and endless, a name carried on the void, Kratos. The voices of the dark gods had taken notice, and as the priests declared him a weapon of the Emperor, Kratos knew in the marrow of his bones that his true battle had only begun. The cell was quiet, but Kratos knew better than to trust silence. The chains rattled faintly as he sat upon the cold slab of stone. Blood dried in the grooves of his armor, the scent of slaughter still clinging to his skin. His body bore wounds, but they were shallow compared to the weight pressing upon his mind. The arena's echoes had not left him, neither had the laughter. He closed his eyes, seeking only the emptiness of sleep, yet it would not come. The silence thickened, coiling around him like smoke, and then it broke. The first voice thundered like war drums across a field of endless corpses. You are fury, you are battle, your hands have never built, only destroyed. Come to me. Kratos' eyes opened, his jaw tight. The voice was not a memory, not an echo, it was real. It filled the cell without need for air or sound, burrowing into his skull. A second followed, silken and cruel, curling like a serpent. Why do you resist, Ghost of Sparta? You once slew gods who caged you. Why kneel now to silence and chains? I can grant you power without end, power to unmake thrones, to reshape the fates themselves. Kratos breathed harshly through his nose, his hand clenching into a fist until the scarred flesh whitened. A third voice came, slow and heavy, dripping with the rot of ages. Ah, child of rage, your wounds are deep, your scars fester still. Do you not long for rest, for the soothing embrace of decay? I can give you peace, not in chains but in eternity. No pain, no guilt, only the comfort of surrender. And then the last, sweet, lilting, filled with a beauty so sharp it felt like a blade pressed against the heart. Kratos, you are not brute alone, you are a man of longing. Was it not love that drove you to vengeance? Was it not grief that carved the world in blood? I can bring her back, I can bring them all back. Your wife, your daughter, your son, only take my hand. Kratos' breath caught, a sound half growl, half anguish. His head bowed, and for a moment the chains that bound him seemed to loosen as if to welcome him into their embrace. The air thickened with color unseen, sickly green light pulsing in the cracks of the wall, crimson shadows writhing across the ceiling, motes of gold fire and sweet perfume filling the air. His cell had become a shrine to madness. He stood. His axe lay across the floor where the guards had left it, wary even to touch the weapon. He gripped it tight, grounding himself. Be silent, he growled, though the sound barely carried against the voices. But they laughed. You cannot silence us. We are in your marrow. We are in your rage, your grief, your lust for war. We are what you are. Visions flared before his eyes. He stood upon the blood-soaked steps of Olympus, Zeus's corpse at his feet. But it was not Zeus's face staring back. It was the Emperor of mankind, his golden crown split, his flesh burned, his body chained to the throne of terror. Lightning split the sky as Kratos looked upon what he had done. Around him millions knelt, not in horror, but in worship, worshipping him. The vision shifted. He held his daughter, Calliope, her tiny arms reaching for him, her laughter ringing pure as it once had. His wife Lysandra stood behind her, eyes bright with pride. And then Atreus, older, stronger, his voice calling him father. For a moment, his chest ached with something he had thought lost forever. But their eyes darkened, flesh split. From Calliope's mouth spilled not laughter but the whispers of Slanesh. Lysandra's arms opened wide to reveal the dripping sores of Nergal. Atreus's eyes burned with the sorcery of Tanch. One by one they reached for him, their love becoming claws. Kratos roared and swung his axe, cleaving the visions apart. The illusions shattered, falling like shards of glass into the darkness. His chest heaved, sweat running down his scarred skin. You will not have me, he snarled. For a moment the voices quieted, and then they came again, unified in dreadful chorus. You cannot resist forever. You are rage incarnate. The Imperium will chain you. we will free you. The Emperor will judge you, we will exalt you. You are ours, Kratos, whether by blood, by decay, by fate, or by desire, you are ours. Kratos sank to one knee, his grip tight on the axe haft, his breath ragged, his heart pounded with fury, but beneath it something darker lingered, doubt. He had lived a life of defiance, he had slain gods, titans, monsters beyond reckoning. Yet even now, in this forsaken galaxy, the cycle repeated. New gods whispered his name, new thrones sought his submission, new voices promised salvation if only he would yield. And for the first time in years he wondered how much strength remained in him to resist. The cell door clanged open. Guards entered, rifles at the ready, their eyes wide with fear. The chamber still reeked of warp energy, though none but Kratos had seen the visions. They had heard his roar, and they feared what it meant. Inquisitor Daron stood behind them, his eyes fixed on the stranger. He saw the sweat upon his brow, the tension in his hands, the darkness lingering in the air. He said nothing, he only gave a nod, and the guards tightened their grips. "Prepare him," Daron ordered. "The Emperor must know what he is." The door shut, leaving Kratos once more in shadow, but the voices did not leave. They lingered, a whisper at the edge of every breath, promising him that this was only the beginning. And as the ship drifted through the void, caught between real space and the Immaterium's hunger, one truth became clear. Kratos' war was no longer against Olympus, nor Midgard, nor even the Imperium. His war was against himself. The chamber reeked of sanctity and fear. Kratos stood bound once more, his arms spread wide by adamantine shackles carved with litanies of binding. Each link radiated a low hum, powered by relic machines hidden in the walls. Candles guttered beneath their weight, wax running down into pools like blood. The scent of incense thickened the air until every breath burned the lungs. He had known chains all his life, the iron of Sparta, the fiery brands of Ares, even the spectral bindings that the gods themselves had once wrapped around his flesh. These were no different. No matter the world, no matter the pantheon, men and gods alike sought to bind him. Always a prisoner, always a weapon. At the chamber's edge, Inquisitor Daron approached. His armor gleamed in the light, a dozen purity seals fluttering like tattered wings. Behind him trailed priests chanting hymns, their words merging into a suffocating drone. A servo skull hovered above, its ocular lens burning crimson as it scanned every line of Kratos' scarred body. "You are a weapon," Daron said, his voice steady, devoid of awe, forged elsewhere, tempered in fire beyond this galaxy, but a weapon nonetheless. "The Emperor demands all weapons serve him." Kratos' eyes lifted, fire glinting beneath his brow. "I serve no god," the priests hissed, recoiling as though his words were venom. Some pressed their foreheads to the ground, praying for forgiveness from the insult hurled at their silent deity. But Daron did not recoil. His lips curved into a shadow of a smile. "So you say. Yet you slew beasts in the pit as though you had been sculpted for such purpose. Even chaos bent beneath your rage. Do you think yourself beyond the will of gods? Even the strongest blade is meaningless without a hand to wield it." Kratos tugged against the chains. They rattled but did not yield. His voice was low, dangerous. "I have broken the hands of those who tried to wield me before." Daron's gaze hardened, though there was no fear. "Then you will be tested. If you are truly faithless, the Emperor's light will unmake you. If you are meant for his service, it will bind you." He gestured. A priest stepped forward, carrying a reliquary, a gilded case containing a relic of terror, or so they claimed. The man opened it with trembling hands, revealing a shard of something crystalline, pulsing faintly within a light. The priest pressed the shard against Kratos' chest. Holy words poured from his lips, a torrent of Gothic prayers demanding obedience, demanding surrender, demanding that the stranger kneel before the Golden Throne's will. Pain surged through Kratos. It was not fire, nor steel, but something deeper, like the claws of memory dragged through his soul. Visions flared. He saw Olympus burning, his brother's chains shattering, his father's face twisted in defiance. He heard Atreus' voice calling across worlds, fading into silence. The relic did not wound flesh, it wounded spirit. Kratos roared, straining against the chains until sparks flew from their wards. The priests screamed, some collapsing in fear as the air shook with his fury, but the chains held. Daron watched, his expression unreadable. "He endures. Even the Emperor's light cannot break him." His voice lowered, more to himself than the others. Then perhaps he must be guided, not broken. He stepped closer, standing just out of reach of the prisoner's bound arms. "Hear me, stranger. You despise gods. You despise thrones. Yet what is this Imperium? if not a war against false gods? Chaos whispers, Xenos infest, heresy spreads, we do not kneel to them, we burn them, you hate chains, then break them here with us, serve the Emperor not as slave, but as executioner. Kratos' breathing slowed, his chest heaving against the weight of the shackles, his mind reeled with the words. They struck him not as lies, but as echoes of truths he had known. The gods of Olympus had been tyrants, he had slaughtered them all. These men, these zealots claimed to fight tyrants of their own. Could it be the same war, only upon another stage? Yet he felt it, the hollow promise, the same old song sung with different words. The Inquisition did not seek to free him, they sought to aim him. I am no man's hound, Kratos growled. Deiron leaned closer, eyes like steel. And yet you will fight, if not for the Emperor, then against him. There is no path of silence in this galaxy. Choose your war, Ghost of Sparta, for war is all that remains. Kratos' gaze darkened. He felt the weight of the words. In Olympus there had been war without end, in Midgard too, and here across this vast broken Imperium, war was not an aberration, it was the air they breathed. The priests resumed their chanting, louder now, as if to drown his defiance. Deiron stepped back into the shadows, leaving the warrior straining against the relic's touch, and in the silence between chants, Kratos heard it again, the whispers, the same voices from the warp, laughing, taunting, promising. They needed no relic, no chains, no priests to bind him. They only needed his rage. His head bowed, sweat dripping into the iron floor. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, the question pierced him not as a whisper of defiance, but as a wound. Would he ever be free? The chains rattled again, as if they already knew the answer. The bells of Cadaverous Secundus tolled in terror. The hive's central cathedral burned, its spires cracked and bleeding molten stone into the streets below. Vox horns blared evacuation orders, though there was nowhere to flee. Chaos cultists poured from the underhive in endless waves, their flesh painted with blood, their chants carrying across the ruins like the echo of 1,000 knives scraping bone. Warp fire curled through the heavens, and the sky itself seemed to writhe with eyes that opened and shut in the storm clouds. Kratos was unchained, not because the Inquisition trusted him, but because necessity left them no choice. When the outer sanctum walls buckled and the first cultists spilled into the cathedral district, Deiron himself had given the order. The Ghost of Sparta was to be loosed like a war beast, pointed at the heretics to buy the Imperium time. The stormtroopers opened the cell. For a heartbeat they hesitated, staring into his burning eyes, knowing that once freed they could not leash him again. But the war outside left no space for fear. They unbound him, returned the axe that had cleaved beasts in the pit, and without a word pushed him into the fire. The streets screamed. Cultists surged across the plaza, their weapons crude, their bodies warped by the blessings of chaos. Some bore horns and fanged maws where faces had once been. Others carried blades dripping with warp light, whispering prayers to Khorne with every swing. The corpses of priests already lined the steps of the cathedral, their blood slick across the aquila engraved in the stone. Kratos descended upon them like a storm, his axe cut through the first wave with a single sweep, limbs scattering across the plaza, blood arcing into the night. A chain whipped from his wrist, coiling around the throat of another, dragging the man screaming into his blade. He moved with fury unbound, every strike shaking the stones, every roar carrying above the thunder of bolters and Lars fire. The cultists broke against him like water against cliffs, but they did not flee, for the warp's whispers filled them too, and their eyes shone with the certainty of deathless madness. They chanted even as they died, their voices rising in chorus, blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, and in those words Kratos felt it, a pulse, a surge, the voices in his mind, louder than before, swelling with delight. See how they fall before you, see how their blood baptizes your hands. You are ours, Ghost of Sparta. Rage is your faith, war is your prayer. Kratos bellowed, shaking his head as if to cast them out. Yet his axe did not slow. He cleaved another cultist in two, the blade grinding bone and steel alike. He stomped upon a broken skull until it shattered to dust. He tore weapons from hands, turned them upon their wielders, and broke the bodies of men until the plaza was painted in crimson. From the cathedral steps the faithful watched. Priests wept, believing the Emperor himself had sent this warrior to deliver them. Soldiers murmured in awe, speaking of saints and angels cloaked in mortal guise. Even Inquisitor Deiron, watching from the shadows of the great doors, could not deny the truth. This was no ordinary man, but Deiron's eyes narrowed, for he also saw the madness that flickered behind Kratos' fury. The battle raged into the night. From the sewers beneath the cathedral, a monstrous form clawed its way free, a daemon host, its body a writhing vessel of broken limbs and shrieking mouths. Warp fire licked its skin, and its voice carried like 1,000 echoes at once. Blood feeds the gate, it shrieked. Blood feeds the gods. It hurled itself at Kratos. The impact shook the plaza, stone cracking beneath their struggle. The daemon's claws carved into Kratos's flesh, splitting scars upon scars, blood spilling across his chest. But Kratos only roared louder. He drove his chains into the daemon's throat, rapping again and again until its screams turned into choking gurgles. With one brutal pull, he snapped its neck, then cleaved its body in half with his axe. Warp light spilled out, and the ground drank it like a wound too eager to bleed. The plaza fell silent for a moment, only the crackle of flames remained, and then the voices came again. "You are chosen." They poured through the air, 1,000 tones at once, mocking, praising, demanding. Kratos's knees trembled, not from weakness but from the weight pressing against his soul. The warp itself seemed to lean closer, its breath upon his ear. He lifted his axe, dripping with blood, and the flames reflected upon his skin like a crown of fire. The cultists fled now, broken, yet Kratos did not pursue. He stood, chest heaving, as though wrestling with a foe far greater than flesh. Behind him, the priests dared approach, raising relics and banners, their voices trembling with awe. "By the throne," one cried, "a saint of battle, the god emperor has sent his wrath made flesh." Kratos turned toward them, and for an instant his eyes burned too brightly. Not holy, not divine, something else. The whispers laughed. Daron stepped forward, halting the priests with a single raised hand. His gaze locked with Kratos's. "You fight as if born to it, yet each kill binds you further. Do you not hear them, warrior? Do you not feel their eyes upon you?" Kratos said nothing. His axe hung heavy at his side, his body drenched in blood, both human and daemon. His silence was answer enough. Above, the cathedral's bells tolled again, cracked and broken, their voices fading into the fire, and in the echoes a question lingered like a wound. Had the Imperium unleashed a savior, or awakened a champion for chaos? Smoke smothered the night sky. The cathedral plaza was a ruin of broken marble and charred corpses. Fires burned in every direction, their glow licking against the distant hive spires like funeral pyres for a dying world. The stench of blood, incense, and warp taint clogged the lungs until every breath tasted of ash and iron. Kratos stood at the center, chest heaving, his axe dripping gore into the cracked stone. He had broken the back of the cultist assault, but the battle had not ended. It had only shifted. A cry pierced the chaos. Down a side street, a squad of Astra Militarum guardsmen staggered into view, their uniforms scorched, their bodies half broken. They were barely more than boys, lasguns clutched like toys in trembling hands. They dragged with them a wounded sergeant, his chest pierced by a blade that still smoked with warp residue. Their eyes found Kratos and widened, not in fear but in hope. "Help us," one shouted, stumbling forward. "Please, warrior, help us." But behind them surged another wave of cultists, larger and more frenzied than the first. Their chants rolled like thunder. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. They carried crude axes and demon-touched blades, their skin split open in grotesque blessings of their patron. The guardsmen fell to their knees, raising shaking rifles, but their fate was already sealed. They were outnumbered, outmatched, cornered against the cathedral steps. Kratos felt the weight of decision fall upon him. If he moved to defend them, he would spare lives, fragile, breakable lives of men who would never survive the greater wars of this galaxy. To save them was to defy the tide, to grasp at sand in a storm. If he gave in to his rage, he could end the cultists utterly, painting the plaza in blood until no enemy remained. But to embrace that fury was to answer the whispers, to give chaos what it demanded, slaughter without restraint, sacrifice without mercy. The voices pressed against him at once, louder now, hungering. "Yes, let go, let the fury guide you, spill blood, not for them but for yourself, every drop sanctifies you." Another voice slid like silk across his thoughts. "Save them if you must, save them, and they will kneel to you, they will call you savior, saint, god. Is that not what you crave?" A third, bloated and warm. "Their lives are short, their wounds fester, end them and they will know the peace of rot. Spare yourself the burden of their cries." And the last, sharp as a dagger to the heart. "Remember Atreus, remember Calliope. Did you not fail them once? Will you fail again? Save them and perhaps redemption awaits." Kratos closed his eyes, gripping the axe so tightly the wood groaned. He saw their faces, his daughter, his son, his wife, flashing through the smoke. He heard their voices mingle with the cries of the guardsmen, until the sound tore at him like a blade across old wounds. The cultists charged. Kratos roared and moved. He hurled himself into the tide, his axe cleaving the first heretic clean in half. A chain lashed outward, coiling around a throat and dragging the screaming body into the crush of his blows. He became the storm once more, his rage a living weapon that carved through flesh and bone with merciless precision. The guardsmen watched in stunned silence as cultist after cultist fell. Heads rolled across the stone, blood spattered the walls, the Aquila, the faces of the faithful too paralyzed to flee. Yet with each kill the voices grew louder. Yes, yes, more, spill until there is nothing left. Every skull builds your throne, Ghost of Sparta. Kratos slammed his boot upon a cultist's chest, driving him into the ground, then brought his axe down with such force the body split apart like wood beneath an axe, his teeth bared, his vision tunneled red. The plaza became nothing but shapes to break, sounds to silence, blood to harvest. When the last heretic fell, silence hung heavy, only the crackle of fire dared remain. Kratos stood among a sea of corpses, his axe dripping, his chest rising and falling like a forge bellows. His hands shook, not from exhaustion but from the enormity of what had passed. The ground was soaked, crimson rivers running into the gutters as though the city itself bled. The guardsmen still lived. They huddled together, staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. One whispered, "Saint," another murmured, "Angel of the Emperor." But Kratos saw their fear, not their gratitude. They did not look upon him as savior, they looked upon him as beast. The whispers laughed, triumphant. "Do you see? They worship you, they fear you. That is all gods require. You are already ours." Kratos turned from the guardsman, his jaw set like stone. He strode into the firelit dark, unable to silence the voices, unable to silence the truth that gnawed at his marrow. He had saved them, yet in saving, he had slaughtered, and in slaughtering, he had fed the gods he swore never to serve. Upon the cathedral steps, Inquisitor Dayran watched in silence, his eyes narrowed as he marked every motion of the stranger, every flicker of madness in the air around him. He knew the truth before the priests dared whisper it. This was no saint, this was a storm barely chained, and as the bells tolled once more, cracked and broken, a question spread like fire across the hive world. Had the Imperium been delivered a champion, or had chaos been gifted its greatest prize? The fires of cadaverous Secundus had not dimmed. Days bled together as war raged across the hive. Cultists rose in endless waves, their shrieks echoing from the underhive tunnels. The Astra Militarum fought with dwindling numbers, their lasguns spitting light against the tide. The cathedral's spires groaned beneath bombardments from traitor artillery, and the sky above seethed with warp lightning that cracked like whips across the void. Kratos stood at the front. Though soldiers rallied at his side, none dared call him comrade. They followed at a distance, whispering prayers as he cleaved through foes with unrelenting fury. His axe drank deep, his chains tore flesh, and his roars rose above the battle like the tolling of war's own bell. Wherever he went, the tide of heresy broke, yet behind him whispers always followed, hushed and fearful. Saint, monster, daemon. On the seventh night, the true test came. The cultists unleashed their champion, a warlord whose body was a shrine to violence. Horns curled from his brow, his flesh armored in brass, his weapon a colossal axe inscribed with runes that burned with warp fire. He was no mere heretic, he was a chosen of Khorne, the blood god incarnate in mortal flesh. The two met in the ruins of the cathedral plaza, the cracked Aquila beneath their feet stained black with blood. The air trembled with the force of their approach, each step shaking the stones. The warlord roared, "Blood for the blood god." Kratos answered with silence, his eyes burning, his grip tight on the haft of his axe. They collided. Steel met steel with a crash that shook the hive spire to its bones. Sparks sprayed into the night as their weapons clashed again and again, each strike fueled by fury that transcended mortal limits. The cultists screamed in ecstasy, surrounding the duel, chanting for blood. Guardsmen looked on in dread, their prayers drowned by the thunder of the battle. The warlord swung wide, his axe trailing fire. Kratos ducked low, his chains whipping upward, wrapping around the daemon-forged weapon. With a bellow he yanked, dragging the warlord off balance, then drove his knee into the creature's chest with enough force to crack ribs like kindling. The warlord staggered but did not fall, laughing as blood sprayed from his mouth. "Good," the warlord howled. "The blood god watches. He approves of you, stranger." Kratos answered with a roar, bringing his axe down in a blow that would have split a tank. The warlord caught it on his weapon, sparks blinding, the ground shattering beneath them. For long moments they were locked, strength against strength, rage against rage. Then the world changed. The sky split with crimson light, the air thickened, heavy with the stench of blood spilled across 10,000 battlefields. Every cultist dropped to their knees, every guardsman froze in horror. Above the plaza, unseen but felt by all, a presence descended. Khorne watched. Kratos felt it, the gaze of a god unlike those he had slain, not a schemer like Zeus, not a tyrant cloaked in lies. This was raw hunger, pure and simple, the god of blood, the lord of endless war. And in his gaze, Kratos felt something he had not felt since Olympus, recognition. The warlord screamed, exultant, lifting his axe to the sky. Khorne, witness me. But the gaze was not upon him, it was upon Kratos. The Ghost of Sparta roared, his fury answering the god's silent call. He wrenched his axe free, spun with inhuman force, and cleaved the warlord from shoulder to hip. Blood exploded in a crimson storm, drenching the stones, the cultists and Kratos himself. The warlord's body fell, twitching, laughter bubbling from its ruined throat until silence claimed it, and then the mark appeared. Above Kratos's head, blood and fire swirled into shape, an ethereal crown of crimson, a halo of skulls wrought from smoke and gore. It burned like a brand upon the air, hovering above him for all to see. The mark of Khorne. The cultists wailed in ecstasy, bowing low, their foreheads pressed to the blood-soaked ground. Chosen, champion, he is marked, he is ours. The guardsmen stumbled back in terror. Some fled, others dropped their weapons, whispering frantic prayers that their emperor shield them from what had been revealed. Kratos felt the weight of the mark pressing into his soul, hot as a chain forged in the heart of war itself. His muscles trembled, not from weakness but from the enormity of the power surging through him. His axe blazed brighter, his rage deeper, his strength boundless. The voices screamed in triumph. He is ours, ours. Blood binds him, rage defines him, skulls await him. Kratos dropped to one knee, his hand pressed against the stone, breath harsh. He had not knelt willingly, but the weight was too great, the presence too heavy. Memories of Olympus flooded him, Ares who had once chained him with rage, Zeus who had chained him with blood, and now here, in this forsaken galaxy, another god pressed chains upon him. Though he had never bent the knee, he roared defiant, forcing himself to stand. The mark burned above him still, undeniable. He looked to the heavens, his teeth bared. "I am no one's slave," he growled. The cultists did not hear, they screamed his name in worship. The guardsmen fled into the smoke, and the whispers only laughed, echoing into the night. Above, the crimson light faded, but the mark remained. Kratos had won the duel, but the victory was not his. It belonged to Khorne. Sleep did not come easily to Kratos, yet when it did, it was never merciful. He lay upon the cold floor of the Inquisition's transport ship, chains once more biting into his flesh. His body bore the mark of Khorne now, a crown of blood that lingered even in shadow, unseen yet undeniable. Guards dared not meet his gaze, priests dared not speak in his presence. Only Inquisitor Darren watched without fear, though even his eyes betrayed unease. When at last Kratos closed his eyes, the warp crept into him. He dreamed. Olympus rose before him, its marble columns shining white against the endless blue. The mountains stretched high, crowned in fire and cloud, the throne of Zeus gleaming gold. But it was not the Zeus he remembered sitting upon it. The figure upon the throne was cloaked in golden armor, his face hidden by shadow, his body bound by tubes and cables that reached into the very rock. Light spilled from him, not warm but searing, merciless. Kratos stepped forward, axe in hand, his muscles coiled with hate. "You," he spat. The figure's voice thundered across the mountain, yet it was not Zeus, nor the emperor of mankind, but both at once, two gods blurred together in form and word. "You have slain tyrants, son of Sparta. You have torn gods from their thrones, and still you stand in chains. Why?" The ground cracked beneath Kratos's boots, his jaw clenched, rage and shame twisting his features. "I bow to no one." The figure leaned forward, tubes hissing like serpents. Its unseen eyes pierced him, and Kratos felt himself laid bare. "You bowed once, to Ares, to vengeance, to rage. You are no stranger to worship. You have always been ours," Kratos roared, raising his axe, but the mountain trembled and dissolved. The columns shattered into ash, the sky blackened, and Olympus fell away. He stood now upon a barren plain of skulls, endless, countless skulls stretching to the horizon, piled into mountains, crushed into dust beneath his feet. Rivers of blood wound between them, reflecting a sky filled with brass and fire. Upon a brass throne at the horizon sat a figure of unimaginable size. Its face was hidden, its body armored in blood-red plate, and in its gauntleted hand it held an axe larger than a fortress. The air shook with every breath it exhaled, every heartbeat cracking the ground. Kratos staggered beneath the weight of the gaze. He knew, with the same certainty as he knew his own scars, that this was no illusion, this was no dream alone. The blood god truly looked upon him. "You are mine," the god's voice boomed, rattling the bones beneath Kratos's feet. "Your rage is eternal, your blood is oath, the mark upon your flesh is no lie. You are my champion." Kratos clenched his fists, defiance warring with inevitability. "I am not yours, I will never kneel." Khorne laughed. The sound split the sky, shattered mountains of skulls into dust, and boiled the rivers into steam. "You need not kneel, you need only kill, and kill you will." The laughter echoed, fading until the dream shifted once more. Kratos found himself standing not on Olympus, nor the throne world of blood, but before a golden light so vast it burned his eyes. The golden throne of terror loomed, though he had never seen it. Its brilliance blinded him, yet he felt the figure upon it still, silent, watching. The Emperor. No words came, yet Kratos felt the weight of judgment pressing against his heart. Not a voice, not a command, only sorrow, endless, fathomless sorrow. For a moment the rage inside him faltered. The Emperor's gaze did not chain him, it did not tempt nor seduce nor command, it mourned. Kratos's chest heaved. For an instant he almost dropped his axe. For an instant he wondered if here, at last, was a god who did not seek to rule through lies, but the sorrow cut deeper than chains. It was pity, and pity he could not endure. He roared, striking at the vision, but the light swallowed his blow, swallowed the mountain of skulls, swallowed Olympus, swallowed all. He woke with a start, breath harsh, sweat rolling down his scarred flesh. The chains rattled against his wrists, the cold metal biting into him once more. Around him, the chamber was still. The guardsmen slept in corners, too weary to stand vigil. The priests whispered prayers, their eyes flicking toward him with unease. Only Daran stood awake, his gaze fixed on the warrior. "You dream loudly," the Inquisitor said at last. Kratos said nothing, his breath slowed, his eyes still burning with visions of blood and sorrow. Daran stepped closer. "Did they speak to you, the gods of chaos? Did the Emperor?" Kratos's silence was his answer. Daran's lips tightened. "Then your fate is no longer in your hands, it will be in theirs." Kratos lowered his head, the weight of the visions pressing into his marrow. He had faced gods and slain them, but in this galaxy, gods were not slain so easily. Here gods were eternal, and whether he defied them or embraced them, he knew one truth. The war for his soul had begun. The void ship Sanctus Veritas drifted through the Imperium like a pilgrim, walking into a storm. Its cathedral spires gleamed faintly against the sea of unreality beyond the hull, though every prayer chanted by its priests sounded hollow, devoured by whispers clawing at the walls. The warp did not sleep, and aboard the ship neither did fear. Kratos sat bound in the sanctum's chamber, the mark of Khorne burning faintly above him like a crown of crimson flame that only the brave dared look upon. Guardsmen kept their distance, priests crossed themselves each time they passed. Even servitors twitched when near him, as though machine spirits themselves recoiled from his presence. Only Inquisitor Daran stood close. For days he had studied the stranger, he had listened to reports of cultists bowing in worship, of guardsmen whispering saint while crossing themselves in fear, of priests proclaiming him a miracle. Yet Daran had also seen the mark. He had felt the surge of chaos that bled into the air whenever Kratos fought. The man was no miracle. He was a weapon half-forged, a blade with two edges, one for the Imperium, the other for its throat, and so Daran made his decision. He stood in the sanctum now, flanked by his retinue. Acolytes in black robes carried relic-blessed staves. A psyker, his eyes white with strain, whispered incantations to mask their intent from the creature chained before them. "You are dangerous," Daran said at last, his voice carrying the weight of judgment. "More dangerous than any daemon we have bound, more dangerous than any Xenos we have purged. You claim no god, yet one has marked you. You speak of freedom, yet you bring only chains." Kratos lifted his head, eyes like burning coals beneath his scarred brow. "You fear me." "Yes," Daran admitted, "and for that reason I cannot allow you to live." The psyker raised his hands. Runes flared upon the chains that bound Kratos, tightening until flesh bruised, until bones ground together. Warp light sparked in the chamber, searing the air. The priests began their chant, voices rising in Gothic hymns meant to call upon the Emperor's judgment. Kratos strained, muscles swelling against the bindings. His breath came harsh, his chest heaving like a furnace. The relic chains glowed, cutting deeper, smoking against his skin. he roared, a sound that shook dust from the ceiling, but the chains held. Daron stepped forward, his voice cutting through the hymns. The Emperor will not suffer your kind. If you are not his, you are the enemy. May his light erase you. The Psyker screamed, channeling his mind into the bindings. Warp energy flared, crawling across Kratos' arms like fire, biting into his very soul. The mark of Khorne above him flickered, threatened to fade, then blazed brighter. The warp howled. 1,000 voices shrieked through the chamber. Candles extinguished themselves, shadows writhed, and the walls of reality trembled. The ship groaned as though something vast and unseen had laid its hand upon the hull. The Psyker's scream turned to a gurgle. Blood streamed from his eyes, his mouth, his ears. His body convulsed as the warp took him, his mind crushed beneath the weight of what he had dared touch. He fell, lifeless, his skull cracked like glass. Kratos' chains shattered. He surged forward, axe in hand before any acolyte could react. The first priest was cleaved in half, him dying in a wet gurgle. The second fell beneath a backhanded blow, ribs snapping, body hurled across the sanctum. Acolytes cried out, staves raised, but Kratos' chains lashed outward, shattering bones, dragging them into his wrath. Daron alone did not falter. He drew his power blade, its edge glowing with blue light, and met Kratos' charge head-on. Their weapons clashed, sparks filling the chamber. Daron's arm shook under the sheer force, but his eyes held steady. "You are damnation itself," he roared. Kratos snarled, pushing him back. "I am freedom." They fought in the sanctum, the golden murals of saints cracking beneath stray blows, the altar splitting under the fury of their duel. Yet before either could strike a final blow, the ship itself screamed. The Sanctus Veritas lurched violently, sirens wailed, red lights flared, vox channels erupted with frantic cries. Warp breach, shields collapsing, we are being pulled in. The floor split, reality tore open in the chamber, a wound of writhing fire and teeth. Cultist laughter bled through the wound, though no cultists were present. The warp itself clawed into the sanctum, dragging the ship screaming into its depths. Guards outside the chamber shrieked, their bodies contorted into grotesque shapes before being sucked into the rift. Priests fell to their knees, sobbing prayers that turned to madness as their tongues split into serpents. The walls bent inward, runes burning out as though mocked by greater power. Daron staggered, his blade clattering to the floor. He stared at the warp breach with wide eyes, horror painting his scarred face. No, no, this cannot be. Kratos stood firm, his axe in hand, his body drenched in blood and sweat. He had seen gods rise and fall, had seen worlds collapse. This was no different. The warp howled, yet he howled back, roaring into the storm as if to defy the gods themselves. The mark of Khorne above him flared like a sun, and in that moment, as the ship was swallowed whole by the Imperium, every soul aboard knew a truth more terrible than death. They had not bound a prisoner, they had not captured a weapon, they had invited chaos itself into their midst. The warp was not sky or earth, but endless war made manifest. Kratos opened his eyes to a plane of carnage stretching into infinity. Skulls blanketed the ground in mountains higher than any spire. Rivers of blood wove like veins across the horizon, and the air itself burned with iron and fire. Above all, the roar of battle never ceased, armies clashing, demons shrieking, blades shattering as if every war ever fought bled into one eternal struggle. He stood upon it armed, his axe dripping though he had slain no foe here. His body was whole, yet his soul felt flayed, every scar burning anew. The mark of Khorne above his head blazed bright, undeniable, a beacon that summoned the gaze of every creature in that forsaken realm. And they came, warriors of every age, clad in rusted plate and bearing weapons older than empires, turned their eyes to him. Demons stalked through the rivers of blood, their fanged maws hissing his name. Even the ground seemed to shudder beneath his presence. A voice thundered across the plain. Kratos. The skulls shifted, grinding against one another, rolling away to form a path. At its end, a colossal throne of brass rose, built from skulls piled beyond counting. Upon it sat the blood god himself, immense and terrible, his armor glowing as though forged in the core of suns. His face was hidden beneath a helm wrought from brass and shadow, but his gaze was felt in every heartbeat, every tremor. Khorne, the god of slaughter, leaned forward, his gauntleted hands resting upon a colossal axe. The sound of his breath was like furnaces burning, his laughter cracked the plain like earthquakes. "You have killed gods before, you have torn Olympus down stone by stone, and yet you come to me, unbound, marked, chosen." Kratos gripped his axe, his body trembling not from fear, but from the immensity of the presence before him. He roared back, defiance in every syllable, "I am no one's champion." The laughter of Khorne split the air, shaking mountains of skulls into dust. "You lie, you are rage incarnate, you are war's son. Every battle you have fought, every chain you have broken, every god you have slain has led you to me. You deny me, yet you breathe my creed with every strike. Kratos stepped forward, chains rattling against his arms, his teeth bared. I killed Ares when he made me his slave. I killed Zeus when he bound me in lies. And I will kill you, blood god, if you try the same. The plain erupted with shrieks and laughter, demons clawing at the air, warriors raising their blades. Yet Khorne silenced them with a single gesture. His helm tilted slightly, as though considering the mortal who dared defy him. Kill me. You cannot. I am every drop of blood spilled, every skull taken, every war fought. I am eternal, and I have chosen you. You need not kneel, you need only slaughter. The words sank into Kratos like chains. Images flooded his mind, armies bowing before him, entire worlds burning in his wake, rivers of blood bearing his name. The voices of the warp sang in chorus, crying out for him to accept, to rise, to become more than mortal. But another vision cut through. Calliope's face, Atreus's voice, Lysandra's hand upon his own. For a heartbeat he remembered why he had broken the gods before, not to rule, not to ascend, but to end the chains. His grip tightened on the axe, his voice tore through the plain. I am not yours. The laughter ceased. For the first time, silence fell across the battlefield. Daemons froze, warriors stilled, even the rivers of blood seemed to hold their flow. Khorne rose from his throne. The plain trembled with each step, skulls collapsing, mountains falling. The god towered above Kratos, vast as a fortress, his axe gleaming with hunger. Then prove it, Khorne roared. Slaughter in my name, or die and be forgotten. Kratos bellowed, swinging his axe as the god's shadow fell over him. The clash shook the plain, sparks flying like meteors, the force driving him to his knees. His arms screamed with strain, his scars blazing with fire, yet he did not break. He shoved back, forcing the god's weapon upward, staggering beneath the effort. His roar rose higher than the daemon's shrieks, higher than the thunder of the battlefield itself. He would not kneel, he would not break. Khorne's laughter returned, booming, shaking the plain to its core. Yes, fight, rage, prove you are worthy of me. Every strike you make is worship, whether you admit it or not. The battlefield erupted anew, daemons screaming, warriors clashing, the sky itself tearing open with crimson lightning. Kratos fought, surrounded by foes unending, each one more monstrous than the last. His chains whipped, his axe tore, his roars shook the blood-soaked ground. And above it all, Khorne watched, enthroned in brass and skulls, his laughter unending. The plain burned, the rivers rose, the daemons howled, and the question echoed across eternity. Would Kratos emerge from this battlefield as a defiant exile, or rise as the chosen champion of Khorne? The Sanctus Veritas was gone, consumed, shredded by the warp until no relic, no soul, no hymn remained. Yet Kratos endured. When the tearing storm spat him out, he stood not upon the ruined hive world of Cadaverous Secundus, nor in the sanctum of the Inquisition's prison, but upon a field of burning steel and shattered ships drifting in a starless void. Around him the remnants of a fleet groaned, their hulls warped by the touch of the Imperium. Fragments of Imperial cruisers lay like carcasses, but others bore the twisted sigils of chaos, their iron hides branded in the runes of daemons. He was not alone. They came to him across the wreckage like wolves scenting blood, warbands of chaos marines, their armor painted in the colors of forgotten legions. Some bore the brass sigils of Khorne, their blades dripping as if always freshly sharpened. Others reeked of Nurgle's rot, their bodies bloated, flies buzzing even in the void. Sorcerers of Tzeentch strode with eyes glowing blue, their staffs etched with ever-shifting glyphs. Even devotees of Slaanesh drifted close, their voices like a choir of mockery and desire, and all of them looked to him. Kratos stood upon the corpse of a broken battleship, axe in hand, chains rattling in the windless void. The mark above him burned bright, undeniable, its crimson glow reflecting in their helm lenses. Behold, one Chaos champion bellowed, voice amplified by Vox Grill. He carries the mark. Khorne has chosen him. The warband roared, chainswords revved, daemons shrieked, bolters fired into the void in celebration. Another stepped forward, his armor rusted but his eyes alive with cunning. Not Khorne alone. Look closer. The warp itself bends around him. The Changer watches. The Plague Father hungers. Even the Prince of Excess stirs. He is no champion. He is the storm. Their words spread, carried across the vox channels of the scattered fleet. Soon the cries became one, a chant that rose like thunder. Champion, champion, champion. Kratos snarled, his grip on the axe tightened. I am no champion. I am no one's slave. But the words were lost in the chorus. The warbands did not hear denial, they heard prophecy, for chaos had little need for truth, it needed only belief, and belief burned hotter than any forge. A figure descended then, vast, armored in baroque plate blacker than night. His helm was crowned with horns, his presence eclipsing even the din of the others. All fell silent at his arrival. Abaddon the Despoiler, Warmaster of Chaos. He strode across the wreckage, his clawed gauntlet scraping sparks from the metal with every step. The eye of Horus blazed upon his chestplate, an ancient wound that still bled rebellion. When he spoke, his voice was iron and doom. I have heard the whispers, the warp itself sings your name, even the gods look to you, Ghost of Sparta. His helm tilted slightly. You are not of this galaxy, yet here you stand, marked unbroken, forged in rage. You have slain champions, you have defied daemons, you carry within you the seed of conquest. Kratos met his gaze, unflinching. I carry nothing but my own wrath. I will not march under another's banner. Abaddon's laugh was low, mirthless. You already march, whether you admit it or not. Every battle you fight, every skull you claim, feeds the gods you deny. You are the blade they raise against the Imperium. The warbands roared again, echoing the Warmaster's words. Weapons lifted high, banners torn from wreckage unfurled, daemons shrieking their delight. The void itself seemed to shake with the noise. Abaddon raised his claw, silencing them. His gaze bore into Kratos with the weight of millennia. I offer you more than chains. I offer you command, a crusade, entire legions at your back, worlds burning in your name. Stand beside me, and you will be more than a champion. You will be a god of war reborn. For a moment, Kratos saw it. An army beneath him, endless, their voices screaming his name. Titans falling before his axe, imperial worlds set ablaze, a throne of skulls rising high enough to shame Olympus itself. His rage, no longer shackled but exalted across the stars. The vision coiled around him like a serpent. His heart pounded, his scars burned. Then he saw something else, the eyes of guardsmen, filled with fear at his presence, the voices of priests calling him saint while trembling as though before a beast, the sorrow of the emperor's vision, the laughter of the gods. He knew the truth. To march at Abaddon's side was not freedom, it was another chain, gilded in brass and blood. His teeth bared. I am no god, and I will not serve one. Abaddon's laughter shook the wreckage. You need not choose, the war will choose for you. Already they gather, already the Black Crusade stirs. At his signal, the fleet lit with fire, engines roared, daemons shrieked, banners unfurled. Across the void signals pulsed outward, summoning more warbands, more cults, more legions of the damned. It spread like a contagion, one voice calling others, one war swelling into many. The Black Crusade had awakened. Kratos stood at its heart, unwilling herald, his denial drowned beneath the cries of worship and war. His axe hung heavy, his breath harsh, his silence deep, and above it all the warp whispered, whether you will it or not, Ghost of Sparta, you are ours. The warp seethed around him like a sea of fire, yet suddenly all sound fell away. Kratos felt his body dragged, not by chains, not by daemons, but by something greater. The chanting of warbands, the thunder of ships, the laughter of the gods, all dissolved. He stood in silence, on a floor of polished marble that stretched endlessly into light. The void was gone, the screams were gone, only silence remained, and before him a throne. It rose higher than Olympus, forged of gold and light, veined with pipes that stretched into infinity. Upon it sat a figure, vast, unmoving, cloaked in brilliance, so pure it seared the eyes. Wires and tubes pierced his body, binding him to the seat as though his flesh were both prisoner and machine. He did not move, he did not speak, yet his presence filled the space more surely than any god Kratos had ever faced. The emperor of mankind. Kratos's breath slowed, his axe hung at his side, heavy as stone. He had slain gods who thundered with arrogance, who raged and schemed and lied. This one did none of those things. He sat still, silent, watching. The weight of his gaze pressed upon Kratos's soul. It was not rage, it was not demand, it was not even worship, it was sorrow, endless sorrow. The Ghost of Sparta clenched his jaw. Another throne, he growled, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Another god bound in chains, demanding all bow before him. I have seen this before. The emperor did not answer, but something passed between them. Not words, not thought, simply knowing. Kratos felt the ages of sacrifice, the burden of a million worlds sustained by one broken body. He felt the weight of the Imperium's worship, both shield and curse. He felt the emperor's grief, not for himself but for the countless lives that died every hour in his name. For the first time in years, Kratos faltered, his chest tightened, his rage wavered. He saw Calliope in the golden light, laughing as she once had. He saw Atreus, bow drawn, standing beside him in defiance. He saw Lyssandra's smile, and then he saw them fade, replaced by the faces of guardsmen who had begged for his help, priests who had cried out in awe, enemies who had fallen beneath his hand. All of them dead, all of them bound to his fury. The Emperor's silence weighed heavier than any chain. Kratos snarled, striking his axe against the marble floor. The sound boomed, echoing into eternity. "Do not look at me with pity. I am no child to be judged. I am no weapon to be wielded." Still the Emperor said nothing. The silence drove deeper, more unbearable than the laughter of chaos. It was not demand, it was not manipulation, it was recognition. The Emperor saw him, not as a champion, not as a god, not as a tool, but as what he truly was, a man drowning in his own rage, trapped in a cycle of war he could not break. Kratos roared, the sound tearing from his chest like a wound. "I will not kneel to you, not to Corning, not to chaos, not to you. I am free." The silence did not break, yet something shifted. For the briefest instant, the Emperor's gaze softened, not in triumph, not in command, in mourning. The golden chamber cracked, light shattered into fragments, the throne dissolved into fire. Kratos staggered as the warp flooded back, daemons shrieking, ships roaring, warbands chanting his name. The vision was gone, torn away like a dream at dawn. He stood once more upon the battlefield of wrecked ships, the Chaos fleet encircling him, their voices raised in worship and war. Abaddon's gaze burned into him like molten iron, demanding choice, demanding conquest. But Kratos's hands still shook with the memory of the throne. The silent gaze that had pierced him cut deeper than the roar of any god. For the first time since he had entered this galaxy, he felt not rage, not triumph, but doubt. Above him the mark of Khorne burned brighter, crimson fire haloing his scarred head. The warbands roared in delight, seeing only a champion crowned in blood. But within Kratos a question remained, echoing louder than any chant. Was he free at last, or already bound? Not by chains, but by the gaze of gods who would never let him go. The banners of chaos tore through the void like wounds in the night. A fleet unlike any seen in centuries descended upon the fortress world of Halion Prime. Once a bastion of imperial might, its surface bristled with defenses, macro cannons, void shields, and regiments of Astra Militarum entrenched in mile-high citadels. Statues of the Emperor towered over the cities, their golden eyes turned skyward as if in prayer. The prayer went unanswered. From the warp came fire. The sky split open, disgorging warships twisted by demonic presence, their hulls carved with screaming faces. At their head came Abaddon's flagship, the vengeful spirit, its shadow eclipsing the heavens. Around it swarmed raiders, dreadnoughts and daemon vessels dripping warp light, and at the fleet's heart, Kratos. He stood upon the prow of a corrupted cruiser, the mark of Khorne blazing above him, visible even through storm and void fire. His axe glimmered with a hunger not its own, and his chains rattled as though alive. The Chaos warbands screamed his name across vox and prayer alike. Champion, slayer, bloodborn. The invasion began. Drop pods rained upon Halion Prime, cracking the earth, vomiting forth legions of traitor marines and daemon-bound cultists. Titans of the Legio Mortis strode across plains, their footfalls flattening bunkers, their guns vomiting shells that shattered fortresses. The air burned with sorcery, with corruption, with endless war. Kratos fell from the heavens like a meteor. He crashed into the imperial bastion at Halion's gate, stone shattering beneath his weight. The defenders, 3 regiments of guardsmen and a detachment of imperial fists Astartes, turned their guns upon him at once. Bolters roared, Lars guns screamed, plasma fire lit the dark. He came through it all. His axe split power armor, cleaving an Astartes clean from helm to groin. His chains wrapped around another's throat, dragging him from the ramparts before dashing him against the walls. Guardsmen screamed, their courage breaking as they saw the mark blazing above his scarred head. Yet they did not flee, for the Emperor's shadow bound them as surely as chains. "Hold," their commander roared, voice trembling. "For terror, for the throne." They charged. Kratos answered with fury. Every swing of his axe split flesh and steel alike. Every roar drowned the thunder of guns. He tore through men and Astartes as if they were no more than shadows. Around him Chaos Marines surged, emboldened by his wrath, their war cries shaking the walls. The fortress buckled. From the heights of the bastion, imperial fists descended, their captain clad in Terminator plate, power fist gleaming. He struck at Kratos with fury, his voice a litany of the Emperor's judgment. Abomination, you are no man, you are no god, you will fall. Kratos met him head-on. Their weapons clashed, sparks spraying across the ruins. The captain's strength was that of a demigod, forged in gene seed and honed by centuries. But Kratos was older than their Imperium, forged in hate deeper than any creed. The duel shook the bastion. Walls split, statues crumbled, blood ran in rivers. With a roar, Kratos drove his axe through the captain's chest, splitting ceramite and bone alike. The Astartes staggered, golden light in his eyes as he gasped a final prayer. Kratos wrenched the blade free, and the captain fell lifeless upon the stone. The Imperial defenders broke. Across Helion Prime, the same story unfolded. Chaos Titans crushed their Imperial rivals. Daemon engines screamed as they tore through armored regiments. The sky rained fire as orbital bombardments annihilated entire hive cities, and at every front, the name of Kratos was spoken. Some whispered it in dread, others in worship. His presence was everywhere, a storm that shattered the disciplined walls of the Imperium and fueled the madness of chaos alike. Yet amid the carnage, Kratos felt the emptiness. He stood upon the corpses of guardsmen, their blood soaking into the earth. He watched Chaos Marines carve the Aquila from the fortress walls, chanting prayers to Khorne. He felt the mark above him blaze brighter, as if drinking from the slaughter. But in his heart there was no triumph, only hollow rage. The whispers came again. Yes, kill, slaughter, every drop feeds us. You are ours. Kratos gritted his teeth, his breath harsh. He remembered Calliope's laughter, Atreus' voice, Lyssandra's touch, faces now drowned in oceans of blood. Was this what he had become? Another hand of gods, another beast in chains. A roar split the heavens. From the warp descended a greater daemon of Khorne, its body a mountain of brass and flesh, wings of fire stretching across the battlefield. It landed amidst the ruins, each step cracking stone, each breath scorching the air. Its eyes fixed upon Kratos, and it bowed its massive head. The blood god exalts you, Ghost of Sparta, it thundered. You are his blade, his fury, his chosen. The warbands fell silent. Even Abaddon, watching from orbit, paused. All eyes turned to Kratos. He stood drenched in blood, his axe heavy, his chest rising and falling like a forge bellows. The daemon's words echoed in his mind, chains coiling tighter with every syllable. Champion, blade, chosen. His hands trembled, his soul raged. His voice, when it came, was a roar that split heaven and earth. I am no one's slave. He swung his axe upward, cleaving through the daemon's throat in a single impossible strike. Blood like molten fire poured across the battlefield, scalding the earth, silencing every voice. The daemon's body toppled, shaking the bastion to ruin. For a heartbeat, silence, then the warp itself screamed. The mark above him blazed brighter, a crown of fire and skulls, undeniable. Yet in his defiance he had slain even a creature of Khorne. The warbands roared in ecstasy, unable to tell defiance from worship. To them, it mattered not. Blood had been spilled, and that was all their gods demanded. Kratos stood over the corpse, chest heaving, his face carved in stone. Victory meant nothing, rage meant everything, and as the fortress crumbled, as Helion Prime burned, one truth spread across both Imperium and Chaos alike. The Ghost of Sparta had become more than a warrior. He had become a war. The storm over Calvaris thickened, its clouds writhing with warp fire. The Imperium's guns thundered still, their artillery flashing against the walls of the silent citadel, but within its frost-shrouded heart, the Witch King had turned inward, for battle alone could not sate him. His gaze had fixed upon a light greater than armies, greater than citadels, the Astronomicon itself, the psychic beacon that guided humanity through the stars. Within the ritual chamber, the Witch King prepared his work. Frost runes spiraled outward across the floor, glowing faintly with the cold fire of the ring. Relics of Calvaris, bones of saints, splintered icons, chalices filled with blood turned black were placed in careful circles. At the center, his throne had been remade into an altar. Upon it rested a mask wrought of shadow and iron, a facsimile of the one his master had once borne in Middle-earth, the visage of Sauron. The Witch King lifted the mask in his gauntleted hands. The crown upon his helm blazed in response, shadow fire leaping toward the relic. He lowered the mask, and as it settled upon his helm, the world dimmed. The walls of the citadel groaned as though in worship, and the ring pulsed brighter than ever before. The warp shuddered. Through the mask his sight stretched outward. The storm around Calvaris fell away. The battlefield below grew distant, and he was drawn across the Immaterium itself. His essence soared through tides of madness, past daemons shrieking in their endless hunger, past the eyes of gods who turned to watch his passage. He was not consumed. he was not turned aside. His crown cut through the storm as a blade through cloth. At last he beheld it, the Astronomicon, a blaze of impossible light, a star not born of matter but of will. From terror it shone, reaching across the galaxy, guiding fleets through the tides of the warp. It was a pillar of faith, a weapon of the Emperor's soul itself. To most it was blinding, to the Witch King it was a throne that mocked him. The mask of Sauron burned, the ring upon his hand pulsed, and his voice rolled across the immaterium. You sit in flame, corpse god, I sit in silence, let us see which throne endures. His will struck, frost leapt across the warp, lashing toward the Astronomicon. For a moment, the beacon dimmed. Across the Imperium, navigators cried out as their sight faltered, fleets adrift in the void staggered, their bearings lost. Worlds whispered prayers in sudden fear as the Emperor's light seemed to flicker. On terror, the guardians of the throne gasped as the Astronomicon wavered. Seers fell unconscious, psychers bled from their eyes, and the halls of the palace trembled. For one heartbeat, the beacon upon which mankind depended was threatened, not by daemon, not by chaos, but by something older, alien, crowned in shadow. The Emperor's light blazed in response. From the golden throne the Astronomicon surged, brighter than before, a torrent of psychic fire that scorched the immaterium. The Witch King reeled as its flame lashed against him, burning against his silence. His mask cracked, smoke rising from its shadow-forged iron. The ring screamed upon his hand, its gold turning white-hot with the strain. Yet he did not fall. You are a corpse upon a throne. For a moment frost and fire clashed, silence and flame locked in opposition. Daemons shrieked at the clash, fleeing into the abyss. Even the gods of chaos turned their gaze, watching as the crowned intruder dared strike at the Emperor himself. At last the light receded. The Astronomicon blazed still, its fire untarnished, its will unbroken. The Witch King staggered within his citadel, cracks running across the mask upon his helm. Smoke coiled from his gauntlet as the ring dimmed, its pulse slowed. But he stood, and he laughed. Though the Emperor's light had endured, the Witch King had touched it. He had made the Astronomicon falter, if only for a breath. Across the galaxy fear had spread, and fear was a throne all its own. He tore the mask from his face, its cracked iron clattering across the frost-stone floor. Shadows licked at the edges of his helm. Hungry, eager, he seated himself once more upon his throne, the ring cooling upon his hand. His voice echoed through the silent citadel. Even gods may tremble. Outside, the battle raged still. Grey knights clashed with the dead. Stormtroopers burned and froze in equal measure. The siege cannons thundered. But within the citadel, the Witch King had touched the heart of mankind's dominion and returned unbroken. Inquisitor Arathis felt it on Titan, falling to his knees in sudden dread. He clutched his aquila, whispering through trembling lips, he dares to challenge the Emperor's flame. What hope do we have if silence can reach even terror? Brother Captain Deros stood over him, armor scorched from battle, eyes grim. Hope is all we have, and it will be tested to its breaking. In the warp, laughter echoed, not of daemons but of a crowned shadow. The mask of Sauron lay shattered, but the Witch King endured, and the Astronomicon would never burn quite as bright, for all who relied upon it would remember that for one heartbeat it had faltered.